Hi, Colleen.
There we go. Was picking up the wrong camera.
It's the French Cafe again. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So let me just share my screen and get started.
Okay.
And can you see my screen, Colleen?
I can.
Okay. So guys, thanks a ton for joining us today, especially on a Friday. And we've got about 500 registrations for this webinar. So I think a lot of people are interested to know how to deliver quarter-on-quarter growth in sales. But
Yes.
before we get into the topic, I'd like to talk about an important topic that is plaguing sales teams around the globe. That's how women are underrepresented there. At Vtiger, we believe in diversity, and we were disheartened to realize that a lot of sales teams around the globe, women are underrepresented, mainly in terms of numbers. And I work with women sales leaders, and I can vouch for them. They usually attack a problem with different points of view that solve them altogether. And to showcase that women can be great sales leaders, we're teaming up with thought leaders like Colleen to share inputs and thoughts so that everybody can benefit and become a better salesperson. Welcome, Colleen. Welcome to the webinar.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah. And guys, before we actually get into the webinar itself, I'd like to take a minute to talk about the topic, non-stop sales boom. So, this topic was crowdsourced. And when I mean crowdsourced, well, at Vtiger, we talk to hundreds of sales teams. And when I interact with sales professionals, I ask them about the challenges they're facing. And one challenge stood out. That's inconsistent sales results. So usually, you have salespeople delivering on a certain quarter, and then the following quarter, their sales completely slump, and they often spend a lot of time trying to go after new leads and generate a new pipeline. And when I actually spoke to a lot of people, I realized even the best sales reps they have the same issue. And
Yeah.
and then that's when I started doing research, and I actually stumbled upon Colleen's content. And I realized, what her approach, her tactics are quite path-breaking and innovative. And I honestly believe that if sales professionals followed what Colleen had to say, now there's a lot to be benefited from there. And and I think Colleen is probably the world's number one resource on this particular topic. She's even written a book on it. It's got 4.5.
I have.
Yes, yeah, she's got it right there. Uh, so yeah, so I think it's a great book. You can find on Amazon. And in addition to that, right now, Colleen's been in sales training for the past 20 odd years. So she's seen the boom and bust cycles. She's seen how sales team perform, and all of this experience can assure you that the tips that Colleen will be sharing with you today is time tested. And Colleen's also known for her no nonsense approach. So yeah, we're hoping that you guys will be able to take away a lot from the webinar today, and at the same time implement it right away.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and see, Colleen's got a laundry list of accolades that I need to go through. So she's a thought leader. She's been rated as a top voice for sales by LinkedIn and other publications. And she's also worked with a lot of companies like Merrill, Adecco, Chevron, and Trend Micro to refine their sales process. So Colleen, again, welcome again. It's an honor to have you. Thanks a lot
Hey,
for
my pleasure.
the webinar.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So this is about Colleen. Now, before we actually start the webinar, I'd like to take everybody through the brief agenda. Now, we have a quick brief on Vtiger for people who are new here. After that, Colleen and I are going to interact and talk about non-stop sales boom. Now, this is going to be an interactive one where we're going to ask her questions and she's going to answer them. So, and Colleen's quite active on social media, so you can always reach out to her if you have any follow-up questions. And she's got a brilliant website called Engage Selling. Now, there are a lot of resources that you can go there and you can actually refer and implement in your sales team. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to speak about Vtiger and why we're actually doing this webinar before we start the webinar, the topic. So Vtiger was founded in 2004, and back in the day, we launched the open source version. Now, at the moment, we've got about 5 million downloads, and that makes us the #1 open source CRM on the globe. And after that, in 2010, we launched the cloud version because we believe that would be a better way to add value to our customers, and it's been going on really good since then. We've got about 300,000 happy users, and we've got 3 offices. We recently opened a brand new branch at Austin in the USA. Are you based out of? You're based out of Canada, Colleen.
I am. Right now I'm in Miami. I spend my time between Canada and the US, but I love Austin. It's one of my favorite cities.
Yeah. Well, if I come to that side of the continent, I'll surely give you a call.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And Vtiger has recently got a bunch of awards as well. We've been recognized by Gartner and G2 Crowd. We are a leader in the all-in-one category. And we've recently recognized as a niche player in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Salesforce automation. So I think it's all the gratitude of all the users out there. Thanks a lot for taking time out to review Vtiger and giving us helping us achieve these awards. I think, Colleen, we can jump straight into the topic here. And so, Colleen, would you want to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. You said that you did some crowdsourcing and found that people were really frustrated with this up, down, swing. And that's exactly how this book and this concept for me started, because I actually was working with clients and talking to prospects in my own consulting business, and they would say things to me like, oh, you know what, we don't need you now. We're having the best year ever, or the best month ever, or the best quarter ever. And then a few months later, I'd get a call and they'd say, oh, sales are in the tank. We don't know what's going on. And literally this happened 2 or 3 times in a row. And, the first time it seems like, wow, it's just an accident, whatever. Second time you start to think, and third time you start to notice a pattern. And so when I dove into it, I discovered that, despite some real seasonal businesses, right, in Canada, snow removal, say, for example, most of my clients, which are in technology, finance, oil and gas, farming, they don't have these huge seasonal swings. And the reason they were having these busts was completely controllable. It was 100% their own doing. And once they recognized what the pattern was and the behavior that their sales team was doing, they could correct it right away. So that's how I ended up writing the book. And I used, some inspiration from my clients all over North America for it.
Okay. And Colleen, so you spoke about these boom and bust cycles.
Yeah.
How do these hurt companies?
They hurt companies in a number of ways, because it's a great question, because people will say, well, what do I really care if I have high sales 1 month, low sales the next, if at the end of the year, everything is, we're all on target. And there's a couple of things that happen, resourcing. So for example, if you're a product company and you need to deliver product, maybe you've got drivers or installers or consultants or trainers or anything like that, those boom and bust cycles really stress that organization, because 1 month you have those, installers, operational people working like crazy, and then the next month they're doing nothing. So you create very challenging operational issues. You also create a fair bit of sales team stress. When the sales team or the salesperson is in a slump, that's very stressful for them, which can create people not wanting to come to work. It can create a bad attitude. It can create turnover. On the flip side, if they're, absolutely working their tails off and trying to get, 200% a quota 1 month because they were in a slump the last month, then that creates stress as well. And you don't want your sales team working 80 or 90 hours a week, because then they're going to crash and burn. So that's a problem. The third problem is the markets. If you're publicly traded, the markets want to see pretty consistent results. So if you say you're going to hit an expectation, you need to hit that expectation. Otherwise, your stock price, could tank as well, even if you're on track to hit your goals. So, those are just 3 of the areas that I see that really hurt organizations by not having this consistent flow of revenue.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now usually, and I've been a part of this, I've had slumps as well. And as you said, it can be quite demotivating. And and I think if the slump continues for more than a couple of quarters, your entire competence is questioned. So I have to ask this question, but more often than not, I used to hit my yearly targets. So, but why should I care? Like, I'm hitting my yearly targets. It's okay if I have 2 bad quarters.
Yeah, it's and you personally, as a sales rep might have that attitude. There's a couple of things though that are really important from a team perspective. You have to remember that if you're not hitting your targets and your manager's letting you get away with that, that sends a message to the rest of the team that slumps are okay. And, the B players on your team might look at that and say, well, if the top guy's allowed to get away with it, then I can get away with it as well, right? So that slump can actually create more slumps in the organization. Two, it's hard on the organization. And as a sales leader, your job is to make sure that you're doing what's right for the team and the whole company, not just what's right for that individual sales rep. So, think about marketing departments and their spend, right? If they don't know what kind of revenue is coming in on a consistent basis, how are they going to plan marketing campaigns, trade shows, travel? Your slump for a couple of months could cause finance, and I've seen this before, to say no more travel or no more expenses, because if you're not bringing in your target and they can't see that you're moving towards hitting your target, if there's no visibility, then that can hurt the organization overall. And two, personally, if you're on commission, even if it's not 100% commission, if it's just a partial commission, wouldn't you rather have consistent income all year as opposed to, am I going to be able to put bread on the table for 2 quarters and then have a windfall? I mean, just personally, from a personal management standpoint, you really alleviate a lot of stress in your life if you've got consistent income instead of woo.
You got it, yeah. And there's one thing that I noticed in most sales organizations, they almost consider this boom and bust cycle to be natural.
Yeah.
As you said, in the clothing industry, it could be with sweaters and jackets. They say, no, it's only going to sell in winter. But I've seen the same thing translate to technology. And in some of the previous companies I worked, they said, no, we are going to close 80% of our numbers in Q3 and Q4. So Q1 and Q2, everybody's relaxing. So how do you think we should change that mentality? And what are the advantages of changing that mentality with the boom and bust cycle?
Yeah, it's funny how we've sort of embraced this hockey stick. Well, that's just the way it is. We're going to go flat and then shoot up. And I think that the reason companies just think of it as natural is because we've been doing it for so long. It's typically it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because if we do have terrible first 2 quarters, then we have to have a good second and third quarter, otherwise the sales leader gets fired, right?
Yeah.
So, it really is this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And I just think it's a behavior thing. I think that a lot of sales leaders don't understand what to look for. They don't understand what the leading indicators of success are that will help you determine what you're going to hit, because we're so focused on closing. And so those sales leaders that really recognize how to set KPIs for the leading indicators of success and the lagging indicators of success and coach their teams on a regular basis will see an evening out of revenue and these consistent nonstop sales booms, as I call it. But the big key is that too many sales leaders aren't close enough to the numbers. They say to me things like, oh, I'm hands off. I just let my guys do. He's a top performer. I don't want to get in the way. And so they're so far hands off from the numbers and not paying attention to the CRMs and the dashboards that they actually don't know what the problem is.
Got it. And what do you think contributes this boom and bust cycle? What do you think are the major problems that need to be addressed?
Oh, you know what? It's simple. Salespeople like to close. And as soon as they have enough in their pipeline, they spend 100% of their time closing all of that business. And they hang on to leads that maybe are not going to close because they don't want to prospect. And so this inconsistent prospecting and a lack of attention to the amount of work that's required for them to hit their goals, or a lack of understanding about how much work is required, is exactly what creates this problem. So when we're closing, we're not prospecting. We close everything in our pipeline. It either wins or losses. And then we go, oh, I have no leads in my pipeline. I better start prospecting. Certainly. And when we do that, we're not closing because we've got nobody in. So it's, when I wrote Nonstop Sales Boom, I wanted people to think about their sales pipeline in more of a circular fashion as opposed to a funnel, and reminding them that they have to be closing and opening and closing and opening and nurturing leads all the time, not doing one and then the other.
Got it. Yeah. And I think I've seen, sometimes sales reps are lucky enough to get really big deals on their plate, and then they spend so much time just closing that big deal. It's great if it closes, but sometimes these big deals don't nurture, or they just push the decision making.
Absolutely. I work with some of the largest organizations in the world and some of the smallest, with salespeople who have been around forever. I work with guys who are 20, 30 years in the business. And it's amazing to me how simple things around pathways to success and leading indicators of success just aren't talked about in sales. And so people don't actually, they're not paying attention to the science of sales, which is really easy to do. And once you do pay attention to that science and that math, then you can dramatically accelerate your results.
Got it. And how do you think we should do it? What are the key strategies that, let's say, a sales professional can use to address this boom and bust cycle?
Yes. So great. So one, some kind of sales math or sales velocity calculation. So I think it's really critical. Salespeople have to understand their numbers, their real numbers, not the numbers they think, but they have to understand their conversion ratios between leads to qualified opportunities and qualified opportunities to closes. My rule is if you don't know your numbers, then use industry averages, which typically is about 29% for closing, qualified to close, and 39% from lead to opportunity. And the reason that those are important is then you can calculate how much your pipeline needs to be, not just in volume dollars, so that you don't get caught up with the whales, but in discrete number of opportunities. And that's a really critical thing. So your CRM then can tell you, if I've got a $2 million quota at the beginning of the year, I might need, 6 million in pipeline. But if my average sale is 100,000, how many discrete opportunities is that? And that way you don't fall into the trap of feeling you're in a healthy pipeline position by having one or two huge monster deals. So those kinds of things are really critical. And the sales velocity calculation is important because that's going to help you calculate what your contribution is to the organization on a daily basis.
Got it. Okay. So you're saying keep a close tab on your numbers, and these numbers mainly include the pipeline in terms of the number of deals as well as the deal size. Don't just go after the whales, and plan ahead. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So Colleen, from this I can understand that this is sort of a collaborative approach where the company and the management collaborates with the sales professional to come to this point, right? Now, because I've seen a lot of sales organizations who don't really go into this depth. And if the managers themselves don't go into it, I don't think the sales reps personally will actually incentivize that. So in addition to these process-oriented changes at the organizational level, what do you think are the different skills that the sales rep needs to develop to think this way?
Yeah. Well, the skills, it's interesting. So one, just from a practical standpoint, all salespeople have to be good prospectors. Okay. I get really tired of listening to senior level salespeople say to me, well, I don't prospect for business anymore. Well, you have to be good at finding new business, whether it's within your existing client base or from referrals or networking or social media. I don't really care what the right thing is for your marketplace, but you've got to be good at finding opportunities. So call it opportunity spotting, prospecting, whatever it is, because that is the lifeblood of your business. In fact, it doesn't matter how good you are at closing. We can teach you exceptionally good closing skills. The reality is if you don't have enough at the top end of your pipeline, you'll never hit your goals. So the skill development needs to start with that prospecting, but also in understanding how many prospects you need, because salespeople will notoriously either over or under prospect. Under prospect meaning they just think they've got way higher closing ratios than they do. So they I found one prospect, I'll close it. Or they over prospect, meaning they feel like, oh, I've got to have so much in my pipeline. And they go out and they find a lot of stuff that really isn't a good quality of prospect. And they fill up their pipeline. And then they have this overwhelmingly large chunk of leads to follow up with that either never go anywhere or they can't get to because they're overwhelmed.
Got it. And I've got a question for you, Colleen. So from what you're saying, a certain person needs to be good at prospecting as well as closing. Do you think an alternative approach would be feasible as well, where, I don't know, you've got closers and you've got prospectors? What do you think about that?
I think it works in some marketplaces, but not all. Especially in a fast-moving startup, technology startup environments, it can be a good way because you're looking for prospects in the marketplace who don't know who you are, or maybe you're bringing a new type of solution to the marketplace. So that kind of what is typically called SDR, sales development reps, can really do a good job of seeding the marketplace in a very fast way. Here's the challenge I have with this. Most of my clients will say, of course, as good salespeople, we want to talk to decision makers. We want to talk to senior level decision makers to see if there's some interest so that we can take them through the next steps. But they put their most junior people in that SDR role. So they're looking to create opportunities that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars worth of revenue for the company. And they're asking them to call CFOs, CIOs, chief compliance officers, CEOs, and they're putting someone who has no sales experience, in some cases, no business experience, new grads in that role. Now, I'm not saying these people are incompetent or incapable. I'm just saying that maybe you've got that a bit reversed. Maybe there is an opportunity for those sales development reps to actually be senior experienced people who can have deep level conversations and then pass them off to an account manager. If you disagree with me and you want those junior level people, that's fine. Just make sure they are exceptionally well trained, because you got one chance to get to that decision maker. And if you screw it up with someone who doesn't know what they're doing, it's over for you.
Certainly, I think that's a very important thing. Well, I've seen that in being practiced in a lot of companies where you've got SDRs and you've got the closers, and the SDRs are new grads more than often. And I think it's a very good thing. And I never really thought from that angle, but yeah, I'm going to think from that angle from now on. Thanks a lot for that.
Hey, my pleasure.
And now this is a tricky one. So, I've met all kinds of sales reps out there. Some of them are metric driven, some of them are number driven, some of them have graphs, complex Excel sheets, and some of them, they're just out and out closers. They use their charm to win the deals, and they're like, I'm not going to look at numbers because I'm a rainmaker. I only go after the whales. So the approach that you're proposing needs some kind of a tweaking, or you need to get these sales reps who are not really number driven to have a number driven approach. So how do you do that?
Yeah, that's great. I'm a big believer in leading with dashboards. For me, we need to make sales and coaching in sales a really objective skill or behavior. So the way I get people who are sort of maybe all about the closing or all about the relationship, those kinds of things focused, is by making sure that their managers have a very regimented cadence and agenda of a coaching. So I like to see coaching done on every other week for about half an hour to 45 minutes. And that sales coaching with the manager is driven by the dashboard. So the dashboard comes up and we can see, here's your results to date versus where you're supposed to be. So, are you high or low? Here's your pipeline or your gap to that goal. And is it in line with where it needs to be given, how many days it takes to close in your closing ratio? Here's your top open deals. Here's your opportunities created, whatever else needs to be on that dashboard. But those first two are important. The first part of coaching always starts with, here's where you are. Here's where you're supposed to be. Are you high or low, right? If you're low, what are we going to do about it? If you're high, how do we continue this to leverage it? Then what's your gap? How big is your pipeline? Is your pipeline enough to hit the goal? And if not, what do we do about it? And if it is, then how do we get that stuff to close? But if you force that conversation in a one-on-one coaching with your team, always around the metrics, then you start to teach them how these metrics in your CRM are actually a tool to help them close more. It's not an administrative exercise. It's not Big Brother just trying to look at your pipeline. It's actually a sales enablement tool that's going to help you sell more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I've seen a lot of sales teams, especially the young ones in smaller businesses, make a mistake. And what they normally do is they use an Excel sheet instead of a CRM. Now an Excel sheet is great. It probably got the job done in 1980s, but not in 2019 anymore. Because I think, Colleen, having an understanding of the number of touch points that somebody's done, I think it's about delving into the details and figuring out where the mistakes are happening, which just can't be done with an Excel sheet. With something like Vtiger, we've got so many features for sales managers. It could be the touch points that the sales reps are having with the customer, the pipeline they have, the expected close, the forecast, and everything in between. I think, guys, when you add all of this up, it gives you a really good picture of where you stand. Yes. And with a couple of clicks, you can really get to know what are the strengths of each sales rep. As Colleen said, you need to be good at prospecting and closing, but more often than not all of your sales reps are good at both. Some of them might be excellent at prospecting, some of them might be excellent at closing. And when you look at these prospecting rates, like it could be from a lead to a qualified opportunity ratio, it could be from an opportunity to a win ratio. When you look at this across your entire team, you get to know where the strengths are, and you get to
Yeah,
also know what training to actually give to the sales team. Otherwise, you're just
absolutely.
going to be pushing them through training sessions, which they're already strong at, and ultimately they might just get irritated.
Yeah, it's so important. And one of the things, so I thought this was a really interesting example. One of my clients in the nutrition business, they're like a payment gateway, mostly for doctors and nutritionists. And they noticed that one of their sales reps, their top performing sales rep, they were sort of analyzing the data and they're thinking, I wonder what is going on here. What they noticed is that because of the data in the CRM, that her demo time, the time she was taking to demo the product, was about half of what it was for everyone else. Everyone else was doing like the standard company pitch of about a 45-minute demo. Her demos were 20 minutes and she had an exceptionally high closing rate. So rather than, the wrong thing to do would be to look at the data and to say, well, you need to do longer demos. Clearly, you're not showing enough. But they looked at her closing rate and realized her closing rate was soaring. What they discovered was, in this case, she was keeping it really simple and only demoing what the doctor or the nurse wanted to see, as opposed to giving this huge, overwhelming demo of all the capabilities. And as a result, people saw exactly what they wanted and quickly said, yep, sign me up. So we changed the entire sales approach to work for all the other reps, and now you're seeing closing rates drive. And that's the kind of use of data that I think is so important, that, to your point, you can't get in an Excel spreadsheet easily.
Yes.
And what I also think is so critical about coaching and dashboards, using a tool like a CRM, is that you have real-time access to data. So my most sophisticated clients are feeding in all sorts of data into their CRMs from their back offices, from ordering. They get alerts if their clients' ordering cadence starts to drop off. They can dive into different products if they're a distributor, different products, different brands, who's up, who's down, ship tos, sell tos, all of those kinds of data, and they use it to make very smart sales calls.
That makes sense. And Colin, going on to the different frameworks that you use to kill the boom and bust cycle, you spoke about something called sales radar. Can you
Yes.
just shed more light on that and how all of this pulls together in the sales radar?
Yeah, so Sales Radar is really like a radar system, and my belief is that the client engagement process is sort of circular, and you can be in multiple stages of engagement with the client at any time, and you have to manage all of these quadrants. I break it down into quadrants at the same time. So we're of course we're attracting clients. We're doing client attraction at the front end, right? So that's the prospecting, it's the outreach, it's putting material out there so that people come to you. It's about sharing success stories, testimonials. We're doing participation. Participation to me is what typically might be called a qualification and a close. So it's getting people engaged, having conversations, showing them return on investment, closing. Now, interestingly then, I believe that the sales rep's job starts when we close the deal, right? So if you stay engaged with that customer through the closing process, onboarding, implementation, we now have growth opportunities with that client. And of course, finally, we have leverage opportunities where we're using those clients to help attract other customers through referrals, case studies, and testimonials. But as we know, you can be in attraction and leverage at the same time with the same customer, right? I mean, there could be active growth opportunities with your client while you're participating. But if you're stuck thinking about one type of step in your sales stage only, then you might miss other opportunities. So if you're in a qualification stage and someone starts talking about opportunities for other divisions to get involved, but you're just focused on this one buyer, you're not expanding the number of people you're talking to, you're not aware of that, then you might miss those opportunities to close a bigger deal right at the outset.
Okay, got it. So I think, Colleen, you're proposing a different way for sales reps to engage with their customers, actually increase the number of connections they have. Can you give me a couple of examples of how this can be done successfully?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I've done a lot of deep analysis of pipeline work and pipelines, and what we have found is that your chances to close the deal go up exponentially as you get past 4 decision makers inside every account. In fact, the latest study from Gartner that was just released at their Sales and Marketing Summit last month, end of September, showed that on average for the complex B2B sale, there's 11 decision makers involved. So one of the ways we have to do this is from the early onset of our work as a salesperson, is we have to be targeting multiple people inside the organization. I believe we need to throw out the concept of an ideal buyer. In fact, I think that marketing concept of an ideal buyer or an avatar has actually hurt salespeople, because in their mind they say, you're my ideal buyer, and so I'm not going to talk to anyone else. Whereas in today's marketplace, what we're finding is the interest, the drive to buy your products could be coming from all sorts of other areas. So an example, client of mine in the oil and gas market, they sell lubricants to manufacturing companies. You know, their typical ideal buyer would be a maintenance manager, a general manager of a facility, maybe the shop owner, the person who's running that equipment. But one of the biggest deals my client closed this year actually came because they were paying attention to the customer service manager. And the customer service manager started to complain or express some concern that they were about to lose a major customer, their number one customer, millions of dollars, because of a faulty product. And in talking to the customer service manager, the smart sales rep realized, you know what, this is a manufacturing problem that I think can be solved with proper lubrication. And so they were able to take that potential loss and walk into the floor of the manufacturer's office and say, hey guys, you know, this is critical. But he was only able to do that because he really had opened his mind to the fact that his product didn't just affect the maintenance team, it actually affected sales and customer service. So he was willing to talk to those people, even though they fell traditionally outside that ideal customer.
I think that's a really good example, because, you know, when I joined Vtiger, I've set up a target customer document. You know, it's a detail as to who takes these decisions. And sometimes we might be too narrowed or myopic in that approach. And if there's somebody knocking on the door, we might just not realize that there's an opportunity. I think that's a really good point. But I've got a follow-up question on this, and that this worries me. Now, I've already reached out to somebody, or somebody's in touch with me. And, you know, we're discussing about the deal. And if I actually reach out to other people, you know, there are occasions where they might be pissed off. And that happened with me, because one of the vendors who caters to me, I did not respond because I did not think it was valuable, and I was quite busy. So this particular lady reaches out to somebody else in my team, and I was like, what the hell, you know, I'm here and I'm the decision maker on this. So how do we navigate through that?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, and it comes up all the time because nobody wants to make the contact they're working with angry, especially if that person is ultimately the decision maker. And I don't believe in ever going around someone or over their head or behind their back in a spurious way that's going to make them angry. I do believe that you need to start asking questions, and I don't ever encourage salespeople to ask permission. So I don't say, can you introduce me? I say, you know, in a decision like this, usually there's multiple people involved, including A, B, C, D, and E. Even better, if you've been on LinkedIn, say, and you've connected with people, you could say, you know, my guess is that Bob, Mary, Sue, and Pat are all going to be involved in this decision. How do you suggest we get them involved? Or I think that, you know, what I'm going to do is reach out to them to make sure that we're creating a solution that meets their needs as well. Would you like to be involved in that conversation, or would you prefer that I do it by myself?
Got it.
So I think it's up to salespeople to set the tone early on and tell the customer how we do business, instead of creating the gatekeeper by only talking to one person. Tell them how you like to work and use that as a selling advantage. Yeah, I know this is different than anyone else you're probably talking to. And the reason is because we know that a successful launch of our product is going to affect lots of people inside the organization. So from a team perspective, here's the exercise I encourage everyone to do. You've got your, I think you said your target client document, right? Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that. But here's what I would do is I would then sit down with the sales team or marketing team and say, okay, who else in the company does our product affect? So, you know, you maybe say, well, it's a CRM, so we're going to talk to the VP of sales. That's our target customer. Well, how does implementing a good CRM affect the marketing department, the customer service department, the quality assurance or the help desk? Does it affect the finance department? Does it affect the accounting department? Does it affect the leadership team? How about operations, right? In a manufacturing client, the CRM has a dramatic effect on the manufacturing, the guys who are actually queuing up orders, because they need to see what's flowing through. And so now you take this document and you can figure out how to approach multiple people in the organization with the value you can provide them specifically.
Yeah, I think it's a really good, really good takeaway from this, because I think from a marketing side, now I know that when I choose to write content topics, it's not always about the VP of sales. I'll probably write something for the marketing person or the support person, and as you said, probably somebody in the factory as well. I think a lot of us think too narrow, and this surely is a really great way to think. And especially in the modern, in the buying persona that's there right now, the journey that the people take, that, as you said, there are about 11 different decision makers or influencers or gatekeepers. And if you touch base with everybody, they'll probably remember you, and that'll help in closing the deal. Thanks a lot for that, Colleen. And then moving on. So, you've spoken about this fundamental shift in the way salespeople need to treat their customers to avoid the boom and bust cycle. Now, this is from an individual's point of view. Now, how do you think a team should change, or what are the different things or strategies that the team should actually put into place for it to be successful?
Well, coaching is the big one. I know I sound a bit like a broken record, yet it is. Coaching time and time again proves that we can drive accelerated success. So the team needs to put into place a couple of things. One, adherence to the metrics. So I believe sales and marketing teams need to, sit together to figure out what the metrics are, so that if marketing is going to drive opportunities into the funnel, we're driving the right type and quality of opportunities, and the right number, sorry. Then from a sales management and a sales team perspective, I believe that you need to adhere to this every other week one-on-one coaching, and potentially either once a week or every other week sales team meeting, which is a slightly different formula because you're not going to be calling people out on their successes and failures. But what you are going to use that meeting for is a brainstorming session on solving problems, highlighting successes, so that people can learn from each other and apply it. So we're rolling out a couple of huge projects right now with clients, and they're long. They're 16-month projects because we're insisting on this every other week sales team cadence. And the clients who are receiving really high return on investment from the programs are saying to me, these meetings are what is driving our success. Our teams are sharing successes, they're brainstorming. I sit in and listen to those, and that's where I see the real magic is starting to happen, because people are learning from each other. I truly believe that the best coaches you have inside your organization are, outside of your sales manager, are your best salespeople, because salespeople respect the top performers. So use those best salespeople to coach the rest of your sales team.
Yeah, I think that saves a lot of money as well.
It can, yes. Yeah, I often have been the only sales consultant, sales trainer, at a big conference, get up on stage and say, I'm here to tell you, you don't need people like me. You've got all the expertise you have. If you've got a top performer in your company, someone's doing something right now, Let's document that.
So you should probably use a CRM or Vtiger for that. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Colleen, I think it's been a good to and fro, and I've personally learned a lot, especially around how not to be myopic and narrow about the way you go after these target customers, and changing their views about customer, and changing the way salespeople interact with their customers. Now, if we can sum all of this up, what are the three things that sellers should stop doing, and they should start doing, and three things that they start doing to actually get out of this boom and bust cycle?
Yeah. So number one is understand the pathway to your goals. So if you have a copy of Nonstop Sales Boom, the formulas are all in here, and you can actually go to the website associated with the book and download the calculator. But that's really critical, because you've got to understand the pathway of leads to opportunities to closes that it's going to take for you to be successful. Number two is to make sure that you're always working in all four quadrants of the sales radar every week, right? You can't go a week without prospecting or attracting new leads. You can't go a week without qualifying. You can't go a week without asking for referrals. Otherwise, you will start to fall into this trap. So recognize that the bust cycle is 100% your doing. If you're in a bust, it's because you haven't been paying attention to one of these quadrants. And so, have a private meeting with yourself.
Okay.
Recognize that not only is it your fault, you can fix it. It's entirely fixable. And the third thing is that coaching piece. We need people to hold us accountable. I believe that the single biggest flaw in the human brain is our belief that we are smart enough and strong enough to change on our own. And that is very difficult. The vast majority of people just don't change on their own. They've got to have someone to hold them accountable and make sure that they're checking in to say, hey, this is what we wanted to do. This is what you committed to doing. Are you doing those things? It's just too easy to not get them done when no one's holding us accountable.
That makes sense. All right, Colleen. I think we're done here.
Yeah.
Anything more? Any advice before we sign off?
No, those are my last 3 pieces of wisdom for you today.
Okay. Awesome. So let's just wait for the Q&A. Guys, if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll wait around for another 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and Colleen, can you see my screen now?
I can.
Okay, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I'm sure this was just an introductory course to non-stop sales room. There's a lot of research that and thought that went into this. And if you want to get started, I really highly recommend buying the book. And if not, you can always go to engageselling.com, and Colleen puts out a lot of good resources and blogs on this, so you can always follow up from there. And I think you can also book a consultation with Colleen. If your organization faces these issues, I'm sure she's really receptive to me. I'm sure she'll be receptive to you when she'll probably get on a call, understand what you're going through, and offer a solution to your challenges. So I highly recommend you do that. Other than that, we've got a couple of questions, Colleen.
Yeah.
Let me just stop my. Yep. I'm just figuring out how to stop my video. Okay, it's here. Okay, so Tyler wants the email link out of the book. We will, so in the email that goes after the webinar, like this webinar is recorded, you're going to get the recording, and we'll send the link to the book as well. And Tyler has another question. So this is to you, Colleen. So he asks, how does a typical coaching meeting look like? Can you share an agenda that you follow?
Yeah, absolutely. So it always starts, generally it always starts with a recap of making sure people did what they said they were going to do the last time, right? So you always start with, okay, so in our last coaching session, you were going to do A, B, and C. How did those things go? So that's where I always start, because we want salespeople to know that we're paying attention to what they committed to. Then we take a look at their results to date. Here's where you are today versus here's where you need to be based on your goal. So the results to date are not relevant unless you compare it to the goal. So, and then you determine, are you ahead or behind? And then what you're going to do about it. So if you're ahead, then, we look at how do we leverage that? What do we see in the future? What does the pipeline look like? How do we make sure we continue to stay ahead? If you're behind, then what's the problem here? I mean, is the pipeline full, but your closing ratio is dropping? Is your pipeline not full? And then we, again, look at strategies, based on the data. And then the last thing we want to do in that coaching session is, again, to commit. So I always ask a sales rep, okay, we've talked about a lot of things. What are you absolutely committed to implementing? Because the things that come out of their mouth are likely the things that will get implemented. So, so that's a basic formula. Now, in a more sophisticated setting, we will have 2 different agendas for coaching session number 1 in the month and coaching session number 2. Coaching session number 1 might be focused on the front end. So let's just talk about the front end of the pipeline, prospecting, qualification. And the second one of the month might be focused on closing deal level coaching, where you're focused on getting specific deals closed.
Okay, and thanks a lot for that. We're actually going on to a question from Peter Walton. Let's see if I can actually decipher this. So I think he's asking, how do you really get the top sales reps to open up? Because sometimes a lot of sales reps who are performing well think that they don't really need any coaching. They're probably performing well in one quarter, and since they're delivering on the year-end numbers, they don't think they need to go through this. So how do you crack through that and get to them?
Well, I mean, I think there's two things here. One, the sales team has to feel like the management trusts the sales team, and vice versa. So I always work with sales managers to say your job is to be respected, right? And your job is to show that you're in this for the betterment of your sales team. All top performers are coached. I don't, whatever sport you pay attention to, right? I mean, Rugby World Championships are on. New Zealand looks like they're probably going to carry the flag again, right? World's most successful sports team ever in the history of sports, and they are coached. They have a coach. They could probably do well, you probably win some games without a coach, but they have a coach because they want to be better. Yeah. So the key is that coach, the manager, has to show that they're in the betterment of the sales team, and the sales team has to participate, because I honestly believe that if you've got uncoachable salespeople on your team, then they may have to be freed up for other opportunities, because you can't drive success if you've got a sales team that's entrenched, right? I'm not going to change. The market is changing, and I'm seeing cases right now where top performers, they're still doing really well, but the challenge is they're working twice as hard, 3 times as hard, because they're relying on sales techniques from 10 years ago that aren't as effective today, and they're not changing with the marketplace. And that's your job as a coach, is to help them continue to be that top performer.
Okay, sounds good. And we got another question from Archit. Yeah. So I think he's a sales manager by this question. So he's asking about the frequency with which you need to meet your sales reps. Do you think they should meet daily?
It's really dependent on the types of products you sell. So, for example, my clients that work in staffing, temporary staffing, because they're in a high turnover marketplace where you might be opening and closing orders in an hour, a daily quick sales meeting and touching base on who's doing what is fine. My clients that are selling multi-$100,000 long sales cycle, 90-day, 120-day, 6 months, 1 year sales cycle, daily is overkill. Weekly would be the better cadence for that. So I think it just depends on how, what kind of product sales you're doing.
Got it. And Archit has a follow-up question as well. If you're using a CRM, he's asking, what are the different metrics that you need to keep a tab on a daily basis or a weekly basis? Let's say it could be without
decision metrics.
What are the different metrics that a sales manager needs to keep a tab on?
Yeah. So results to date versus goal, opportunity pipeline. So the full funnel, both based on volume and the number of opportunities. I think we want to keep track of the average days in stage. So you want to know how long everything is in the pipeline overall, but also how long does it take to convert from lead to qualified to whatever the stages are. A really important and overlooked metric is the number of times the close date pushes. So you've got a close date of some sort. The more it pushes, so in other words, the more times it's changed by your sales rep, the less likely it is to close. Somewhere around the 5th time that it changes, you almost have a 0 chance of closing that business. So you really want to pay attention to how often your sales team is going in and just arbitrarily changing the number. Peter says that I can't get a hold of him, so I'm just going to push it out 30 days. I can't get a hold of him, I'm just going to push it out 30 days, right? Yeah. That's a metric you got to track. Average deal size is another important one that we want to track. And those are the big ones. And then everybody's business is going to be different based on product, service, size, so.
Okay, so Arshit, I hope that answered your question. We've got another question from Thomas. I think this is about Vtiger. His question is, his company deals with tenders from governments, and how can Vtiger help get the most out of this? I think, is it okay if I take this question?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Thomas, thanks a lot for your question. Now, Vtiger is built from the ground up for sales teams, and this is across different industries. We've got 2-member sales teams to 300-member sales teams using the product, and they have different kinds of customers themselves. So whether you're going after governments or enterprise businesses or small startups, Vtiger is built to actually accommodate for your flexibility. You can actually pipe in these deals, and I think these tenders will probably take a long time to close. They're high-value deals. So as Colleen mentioned, you need to probably scope out who the decision makers and the influencers are. Now, Vtiger really gives you the possibility to add all these contacts around the deal and monitor the deal in a close way. Now, and if you're a sales manager in a company, and if you have set up a process where your sales reps need to be in constant touch with these government decision makers, we've got those features as well, where we give you indicators about how active the sales reps are, including the email, phone calls, and even chat activity. So, and if you have any further questions, you can, like my colleague Naeem will be in touch with you. So, he'll give you a link where you can schedule a one-on-one demo, and we can showcase how Vtiger can help you out. So, yeah. Other than that, I think Colleen, we've got a couple more questions. So this is So this is coming from Taylor again, and he's got an important question. So I think from his question I can make out he's an entrepreneur from a technology background. And usually, when you have a product market fit and you succeeded, and it's come to a time where you need to hire salespeople, but you don't have any prior sales experience yourself. How do you think you should get started?
So this is always a bit tricky. The key is to find people who have sold in similar environments as you, and who have experience selling in the same cycles at the same price point to the same type of people. It doesn't have to be someone from that industry, and it doesn't need to be someone who's experienced in the technology that you're selling, because you can be that technology person, right? Like you can team sell. But what you're looking for, and where they make a mistake, is they get excited because they say, oh my gosh, this guy was the #1 person for IBM. He sold $10 million a year. But if you're a technology startup, hiring someone from IBM could be a bad idea. Not because that guy isn't great, but he's used to working inside a big machine with marketing and expensive big CRMs and back-end systems and technology specialists and and a whole monster machine around them. And so they might not be good at the fast-moving, bootstrapping kind of business. So you want someone who has had success on their resume of working for a startup or a small business or something where they have to do all the work alongside you. So that's the most important thing, is to don't as a technology entrepreneur, don't get distracted or don't fall in love with the sales rep who looks like they're successful in a marketplace that hasn't had the same type of sales approach that you need.
Got it. And I think we've got another question from an anonymous attendee. I think that you already addressed this question, and the question's about if they need to have daily meetings. Guys, reiterating what Colleen said, I think it depends on your sales cycle and your team. Can, if it's, Colleen, do you want to take this, or should I just recap it for you?
Yeah, I'll just recap it by saying, if you have a really short sales cycle, then and so deals are coming in and out of the pipeline all the time, then yes, it's a good idea. If you have a longer sales cycle, anything more than 30 days, then I wouldn't recommend daily sales meetings at all.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and I think Peter has another question. So you mentioned about how you need to get the top salespeople to train the low performing ones. Now, so the question is, what if the management doesn't really recognize this as a good strategy? Sometimes it could be there's a conflict between the top sales rep and, I don't know, the VP of sales, or sometimes really good closers might not be great teachers. So how do you think we should navigate through this hurdle?
Well, this is a great question, and I'm not sure. I think what I would do is a couple of things. If you're a top performer and you've got great ideas to share that you think can help other people, then you could step up and take on a role at a sales meeting, to share a success story. Or you could take a junior person under your wing and say, hey, come make some joint calls with me. Or you could be a mentor, right, to that person. If you're a mediocre performer or new, and you think that there's someone on the team who can really help you be successful, then go to your management team and say, hey, you know what? I sit next to Peter and he is closing deals like crazy. I'd love for him to present some of the ideas that he works on. So I think you can take the lead there. I think too, a great idea, and maybe the sales team can get together on this. I just spoke at a sales kickoff for a large company. And what we did is we actually didn't just have me deliver content. I delivered some content from the stage, but then I interviewed their salespeople who exhibited what I was talking about. And so I said, here's what's working in the marketplace. And then, oh, by the way, here's one person going to sit next to me, and we're going to talk about how they're executing that for success in the marketplace. And so the audience got to hear from, over the course of the day, I think there was 5 or 6 of these people, and the sales team loved it because they could see how what the expert was saying actually came to life in their own market. And that's fabulous.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that, Colleen. Just give me 1 second. I think we're done here. We've answered all the questions. And I'm just dropping a link to the people here in case they have further questions. They can schedule a one-on-one sessions, and then we can answer that there. Yeah, I think we're done. Thanks a lot for this, Colleen.
Awesome, thank you. It was really great working with everyone. Thanks for all your great questions, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Colleen. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.